Okay, let's go. Thank you very much to all the people that is in this webinar hosted by the University of Vic, Central University of Catalonia, the Communication Science Department, and the SPRING, the Sports and Politics Research Network. We are very pleased to have in this webinar Professor Mariann Vaczi from the Center for Basque Studies from the University of Nevada in Reno, and one friend of the university and one of the authors that contributed to our latest book, FC Barcelona, History, Politics, and Identity. Mariann, thank you very much to be at the University of Vic and to be one of the guest speakers in this webinar hosted by Spring Research Network. I'm going to give the floor, first of all, to Nawel Ivan Faedo, one of our assistant lecturers at the University of Vic, in order to do the presentation of our speaker. Thank you very much.
Okay, many thanks, Xavier, and welcome to all of you. As Xavier said, let me introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Mariann Vaczi, assistant professor at the University of Nevada in Reno. She has a PhD in Basque Studies and Anthropology, and today she will present Catalonia's Human Towers, Castells, Cultural Politics, and the Struggle Toward the Heights. Dr. Vaczi is from Hungary, if I'm right, lives in the United States, and is interested in Catalan culture, showing how globalization brings people and culture together. She will present for about 30 minutes, and then we will have 15 minutes for questions. So, Mariann, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Xavier, and Nawel for the introduction. Yes, I'm a cultural anthropologist, to further introduce myself, and I work, as you can see, at the Center for Basque Studies, because that was my original research focus as a cultural anthropologist within Spain. So my first work as an anthropologist of sport was about Basque soccer madness, and particularly Athletic Club de Bilbao, and that was my dissertation. And then a book came out of that, and in that work, I looked at how soccer or football both reflected and constructed national identity constructions, nationalisms, and so forth. And after that project, to introduce the book that I'm going to talk about now, after that project and the book on the Basque country and Basque sport, I wanted to diversify a little bit. And I went to Catalonia, because in Catalonia, this was 2014, in Catalonia, the process, the independence movement was catching up, and it was one of the biggest topics and of conversation in Europe. And I wanted to go there to look at Football Club Barcelona and football in Catalonia, and how it was symbolically involved in nation building processes. But then, and I was going to go for only 2 months. And then one night, when I was talking with a football fan in Barcelona, in the district of near Clot, I was it happened to be the headquarters of the Castells de Barcelona. And as we were having this conversation with this soccer fan, I saw the Castells building towers in the little yard or practice area of the bar. And I asked him, what is happening here? And he told me, well, this is part of Catalan traditional culture, and he explained to me a little bit what was going on. And I just looked, and I was completely fascinated. So this was a very, very much of a chance encounter. I was really, that first encounter fascinated me because of how the bodies were working together, and it was kind of mesmerizing. So I kept going back, and eventually I changed my focus, shifting from football to human towers, although I did follow football as well. And as Xavier mentioned, I contributed to this edited book on Football Club Barcelona. But my main focus became human towers and Castellers and El Món Casteller, and how it got implicated and involved in the process and also other political dimensions of popular culture. And instead of 2 years, instead of 2 months, I stayed for 2 years. I joined the Castells de Barcelona, And besides them, that was my base, that was my team. I performed with them as a castellera for 2 years. And besides this base, I also visited several other collas all over Catalonia. Okay, so just, I'm sure a lot of you are actually zooming in from Catalonia, but for those of you who aren't, this is a 200-plus-year-old traditional sport. It is intergenerational, gender inclusive, and amateur, and its main aim is social integration. Castells have been booming since the transition from the Franco dictatorship to in 1975. Back then, there were only a handful of teams. And today there are more than 100. So this is a great boom. Sometimes Catalans, who are stereotypically described as a little pessimistic, they say, yeah, this is a great boom, but this too shall surely pass. But it's not passing. It's really a growing world. And the story is also a story of how something kind of marginal, belonging to marginal social segments, gradually has shifted into the symbolic center, becoming one of the main symbols of Catalan nation building in the current contemporary era. And so human towers are built at festival squares, political rallies, sports events across Catalonia over several weeks and months. More than 15,000 human towers are built yearly at these events. Some of the reasons for its current success are women's integration, and I talk about these things a little bit more in detail as I present the book. Social class gentrification, economic crisis. The economic crisis kind of ushered people more towards cheap ways of sociality, and this world is one. The pro-independence turn in Catalan politics, which also pushed human towers into the process as part of it, and then certain sportification processes which are making human towers increasingly popular in Catalonia. And so in the book, my main research question was basically, how does the political emerge through Castells in this particular context, in this particular political context in Catalonia? How does the moving body become politicized, and how does ideology become embodied through this movement, culture, or sport? And once again, we have to note that Castells is, I like to look at it as a multiple genre activity. It is sport in many regards for me, because of certain competitiveness which is arising, because of taking records, because of quantification, numbers, there's a certain ranking system, but also it's very much rooted, obviously, in popular culture and folklore. So some people consider it more like folklore or popular culture. Others would consider it sport. It's in this liminal space of multiple identities, which helps it thrive socially. Okay, so my first chapter is something of a social history of human towers, and I revisit several collas and how human towers, the practice and the social base, has shifted gradually from marginal social segments to the symbolic center. Castells used to be called Castellers, used to be referred to as Jean de Petit Rod back in the days, people of farts and burps, which referred to their peripheral social position. They were men before the 1980s. They were men from the small villages, from the ports, from the taverns, they were dock workers. So they were the working class. And this base gradually opened into towards more middle class segments and also professionals, which is a certain social class gentrification. which allowed the practice to spread across society more efficiently. But let me just read out a quote that I have in the book describing the world of Castells, or at least some of it, because like I said, there's all kinds of, by now there is not only the working classes but middle classes integrated as well. Efforts to cut expenses were not something to be ashamed of, but were natural. Once a year, the Castells de Barcelona organized a gala dinner before Christmas. Tito and Sergi did not attend it. Instead, I found them sitting on the terrace of the Chinese bar across the street of our local, observing our team members, mostly the younger generations, arriving in suits and fleetered mini dresses and balancing on high heels. They were visibly enjoying the spectacle of their teammates' metamorphosis. Aren't you attending? Where is your gala suit? I asked them in friendly provocation. I can't afford a gala dinner, Sergi snorted, mocking the pretentiousness of it all. But I'm wearing my gala body. He loved and caressed his beer belly. The bar of our locale offered cheaper meals and drinks because its purpose was non-profit. But even so, it was not unusual that people would skip occasions like this for financial reasons. Some families would bring home-cooked meals in plastic boxes, and some men bought even cheaper beer in the small supermarket across the street. This was a world where some quit smoking at the end of the month or at the end of their eligibility for unemployment benefit. Okay, so at the same time, this transformation of the social, from moving from the social periphery to the symbolic center, was crowned by participation at the Olympic Games, and also the recent, or kind of more recent, UNESCO title of intangible heritage. Okay. Now, my second chapter is about basically touch, which was always one of the most fascinating and salient features for me about Castells. Touching is visually, and also if you are a participant, is the most important experience, perhaps, and it always strikes you as something very primal. So, for example, I write in the book, I like to bring visitors to the plaza to show them Castells and observe their reactions. One day, I invited the American in-laws of a friend to watch our performance in the old fisherman's district of Barcelona. So what do you think? I asked them after a performance. Well, what can I say? The father answered, visibly perplexed at the sight of such intense body contact between genders and generations who were neither lovers, nor family, nor even close friends. This practice would be unthinkable in the United States. And so I look at the politics, erotics, and social class of touch and body proximity. As far as erotics goes, I come from the sociology and anthropology of sport, and in these disciplinary traditions, there's a lot of attention paid to how the body is eroticized and over-eroticized in sport and in the sport media. Here, I look at the reverse challenge, how to de-eroticize the body, how to touch and not to think of its erotic dimensions, because there's going to be a lot of touch, a lot of body proximity in Castells, and you cannot think of touch in any kind of erotic terms, obviously, because there are children involved, and it's an intergenerational practice. And then, of course, there is the social class of touch, and I discuss, this is a little venture into sensory anthropology, and I discuss this dichotomy between the visual, which is considered to be a higher prestige sense, belonging to the upper classes, which were keeping a distance. If you've read Eliot's civilizing process, as opposed to the working classes, which are more associated, working classes or the subaltern or women who are more associated with touch, which is the primal sense. Okay. Then my next chapter is about the Chiquets de Valls. It's titled Rivalry, Antagonism, and Identity among the, hold on, I think we, Okay, we skipped that chapter. Okay, this is my next chapter. Risking the fall at political rallies. Now, in this chapter, I actually go to follow human tower performances at to particular political rallies. Like I said, the independence movement really started to intensify in 2010, 12. So when I was doing field work between 2014 and 16, I went to a lot of these rallies, and even afterwards, where human towers participated and which variously vindicated either independence for Catalonia or the right to vote. And what was particularly interesting was the Diadas, of course, which are the National Days of Catalonia, celebrated in September. And about 50 to 60 human tower teams participated in these Diadas, so they became part of the visual landscape of these Diadas. And this visual landscape is important to mention because the Diadas were extremely well designed in terms of transmitting a certain symbolic message. Great amounts of people showed up, 1 million people during those years. And the Diadas were always designed very carefully by the NGOs which organized it to transmit a social symbolic message about nation building, about community, about coherence, and they would be intended to be photographed, and the photographs were intended to travel across the international media. And so we were part of this landscape, and we were building towers during these events. And so I look at how human towers have basically two functions. One of them is the mythical function, and the other is the allegorical function. The mythical function is when towers are beautiful and complete and coherent, and they stand, and they have this glorious completion. And then, of course, the allegorical function is when they collapse. And the big stakes at these independence rallies is whether it stands or collapses, and that performative outcome would make a very different impression as it's streamlined live in the global media. So, for example, in 2015, we were participating at the Diada, and in this particular case, there was the crowd, 1 million people, and there was this big yellow arrow cut out of cardboard, which runners were carrying through the crowd, and we were supposed to, 50 human tower teams build towers as the arrow passed, and this is what happened in my Koya. In 2015, tower building had to take place exactly when the arrow passed, not a moment early, not a moment late. It had to stand, be crowned, and be dismantled. No place for any fuss and multiple attempts, much less a collapse when the world was watching, which is why we chose an 8-level structure that we did routinely. This was not the time to enhance the risk of falling. The crowd's excitement intensified as the runners were approaching. "Let's go, people, let's start," our team captain yelled. We took our positions, and the base was soon complete. The music started, and I felt bodies crawling on top of us to start their climb. "Binga, let's go," someone said, and we heard the growing murmur of the crowd mixed with the sound of helicopters. "Give me chest, more shoulder from the right, grab my hands. Is it here yet? Oh no," someone groaned. "Please not now. Let it not collapse just now." Such is the visual force of a falling that, in a moment when the world was watching, it felt it would have sent the entire edifice of the Catalan Republic against the ground. A collapse would have turned the rally and its objectives ridiculous by revealing an incongruity between bold political ambitions and shaky foundations. So basically, this is a reference to how human tower building as a symbol, as a mythical icon, contributed to the nation building message, in a sense of rallying people together, diverse people coming together, working hard towards a spectacular edifice of Castells or the Catalan Republic. But the reverse side of it, the risk of it, is collapse. And so how that kind of the two faces of Castells kind of also illuminate two different approaches to the process from people in Catalonia. Okay, fourth, rivalry, antagonism, and identity among the Xiquets de Valls. I revisit here the rivalry of these two foundational teams from Valls, which goes back to the late 18th century. Let me just read out a segment from the book and which reveals the nature of the rivalry. The news of their courtship sent Berto's father into a state of alarm. "Are you sure?" the old man asked incredulously. "Think it over. He's the team captain of the other team. He's not just a performer, he's their team captain." He shook his head and insisted, as if in one last effort to avert an impending catastrophe. "Think it over. They say that when a young woman gets herself a new boyfriend in Valls, the first question her people will ask is not who he is, what family he comes from, or what he plans to do with his life. Rather, they ask which human tower team he supports. For more than 200 years, the town has been divided between the teams Colla Vella dels Xiquets de Valls and Colla Joves Xiquets de Valls. They are the old gang and the young gang, respectively, even though among themselves they never say these names. They refer to the rival group as l'altra colla, the other gang, or simply l'altra, the other. Together they are called Xiquets de Valls, and it is their rivalry that founded and cemented the practice of human tower building. So here I look at basically how rivalry, which is supposedly something that inserts division into the social, ends up actually cohering the social. It ends up actually creating a community. And so I look at the role of antagonism for identity formation. And it's, for example, in this case, you nicely see how this rivalry, although there are divisions, it ended up, first of all, human tower performers would say that it's owing to this rivalry that the practice survived during the leaner years of the 19th and 20th centuries. So it was absolutely constitutive for the survival of the practice, but also you can see how identity formation is dependent on the other, and I look at the role of the other as constitutive of identity formation, and we can extrapolate it, of course, onto other rivalries, such as between Football Club Barcelona and Real Madrid. Okay, so this is pretty much the first half of the book, which is more about politics and kind of more directly related to contemporary politics in Catalonia, and then I shift to the politics of gender in general, and I'm going to speed up here to not to go too long. So the integration of women in the 1980s in popular culture in general and in human towers in particular is often referred to as the greatest revolution. This is a unique story because human towers does not only tolerate the presence of women, it actually thrives on it. Human towers, the building itself, the sport itself thrives on body diversity. So the more types of bodies you have, the better, shorter or thicker or thinner or smaller. And so women and women's bodies greatly enhanced body diversity and their ability to hold and climb and hold balance greatly contributed to the performative boom and the spectacularness of human towers. So this is, you know, the world of sport is struggling or has struggled with the integration of women. It is still a sex segregated realm overwhelmingly, but human towers is actually a unique sport where all genders and all generations can be effortlessly integrated, and it is even desirable from a performative perspective. And so when women started to get integrated, and nowadays when people talk about this process, they speak very highly of women and women's abilities. For example, today one may hear veritable accolades about female ability. Ramon, a force of nature at 6'2" and 220 pounds, and a former team captain of the Castells de Barcelona, showed me around his collas local and stopped before the only woman's face on the wall, who was the Cap de Colla. She's my idol, he said. She was the only woman team captain we ever had. She had a quiet voice, but when she talked, she radiated tranquility. Her quiet, Ramon, you are doing well, calmed me and pushed me on. And then he elaborated on how he saw the role of gender for Castells, which he defined not in physical but temperamental terms. We men are hot-tempered. My experience is that women have much more sane, cold head. They know better how to handle pressure, insecurity, this sensation that people are watching, the feeling that we are on the point of collapse. Men enter and we try to show that everything is all right. We talk too much to hide our nervousness. We lose a lot of time trying to hide our insecurity. Women have fewer complexes about admitting that they are nervous, which allows them to concentrate better. And so this chapter basically focuses on the politics of, in a broader sense, the politics of women's integration in popular culture, particularly starting with the 1975 transition to democracy, where popular culture and the women's question was very tight, and political emancipation were themes that were very closely tied and took place in the street through associational culture, for example. And bones have no gender is one of the phrases that I often heard, which in reference to the fact that Castells is not reliant on sheer muscular body force. It's reliant on the number of people who actually show up. And women also, it's important to note, so women boosted Castells performatively, higher, more spectacular structures, but also socially. So women made kind of civilized the former rowdy world of male Castellers. They made the world of Castells kind of appear more secure for the integration of children, and so their presence attracted also more middle classes and more families. So this kind of diversification was very important. And then finally, the grace in every child is another chapter, which it's a chapter I dedicate to the role of children and the presence of children in Castells. I like to say that if the integration of women is a kind of intellectual pleasure because of its progressiveness, the presence of children is the emotional force of human tower building. I often heard people say how the kind of intense emotional reaction they had to children climbing up there, struggling with the bodies, and eventually, moving up on the shaking tower, so brave, and they crown the tower and they come down, and these children are often 5-6-year-old little ones, and so I look at their presence in the world of Castells as a kind of quest for grace. Obviously, they are also the guarantors of intergenerational cultural maintenance. And so, for example, I look at also reversals and how they become at some point of Castells building actually the main decision makers. These 5-6-year-old children, I look at how they are trained to make these decisions, for example, whether to complete a tower or come back down, and how they are trained by their coaches to deal with fear, risk, and responsibility. Okay, What glory those little ones brought us. Enric reminisced in our locale one night about a set of 6-year-old twins who catapulted our team, the Castells de Barcelona, among the top 8 a few years before. What glory they brought me, team captain Ramon added, noting the irony that he, a 6'2" and 250-pound force of nature, owed his legendary coaching fame to a couple of 6-year-olds. Children are the most valued, most specialized, and hardest working members of a team. Their speed, their technique, and their cool head are decisive factors between a collapse or a safe completion. Their swiftness and calm determine how long our agony in the base will last. They have absolute decision-making powers over whether to climb, finalize a tower, or start descending without completing it. And so one of the things, for example, they are taught, which I always look at as a feminist lesson, particularly noting that 90% of these climber children on the top are girls, is how to say no when they don't feel up to it, when they don't feel up to climbing, how to say no to that kind of peer pressure of practicing a tower for several months. And it actually happened. We were going to do this record-breaking tower. And the morning of performance, one of these 6-year-olds said, no, she didn't feel up to it. And so we didn't do it. And we had to respect that decision. And she knows that she can say it. She knows she can say no, which is, I see it as a feminist lesson for life. Okay, and finally, I'm not going to go into this chapter. This is the final chapter about the death of a child. Mariona, those of you who are familiar with the world of Castells know about her accident, and this was a very sad story. And I finished the book with the death of this child and how the community pushed through and came to terms with her death, and how precarious that situation was, how the world of human towers actually almost collapsed and disappeared because the safety of it was questioned, and how they eventually survived it and kind of cohered into a new kind of community through the death of a child. Okay, and this is the end of it. So I just give the floor back to you and see if you have any questions. Okay, and I should stop sharing, right?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mariann. It was a fantastic presentation. I don't know if anyone from our participants want to ask some questions regarding Castells or all these aspects that Mariann explained to this presentation. Mariann, I want to ask you one question regarding your overview, your wide overview, because you are from Hungary, you travel to States, you researched on the Basque country, you moved to Catalonia to analyze popular culture. I don't know why a Hungarian researcher is interested in Spanish popular culture, and above all about regional Spanish popular culture.
Right, and sport, right?
and sport, because your chapter in the book about FC Barcelona is also very interesting. But let's talk about general popular culture, because talking about sport is not the objective of this seminar.
Oh, right. Yes. So it was a series of accidents. Basically, how did I end up researching the Basques to begin with was accidental, because I was doing my undergraduate degree in anthropology in the United States, and I got this little study abroad opportunity, a little grant to go study abroad, and the only kind of anthropologically related program was taking place in the Basque Country. So I went. So this was when I was 22 years old, right? I went to the Basque Country on this study abroad program for 6 weeks and earned 6 credits. And that's how my interest in the Basque region started. Then I did my master's degree, and then I applied here to the Center for Basque Studies for the PhD program in Basque Studies and Anthropology. And then came the question of, okay, within that, what am I going to study within Basque culture? And I ended up with sport, because I'm an athlete. I was an athlete formerly. I actually came to the United States with an athletic scholarship first, and that's how it started. And then, like I said, after my dissertation and book, I wanted to look at sport in Catalonia, and then shifted towards popular culture more, and towards the world of human towers.
And there's another question regarding research, more concretely about research, because we are in a research seminar. And one of the aspects that I want to ask you is, in your opinion, what are the clues in order to research in anthropology? Because anthropology is very far from our research in social sciences and communication. But now in our school we will start a new bachelor on global studies where some elements about anthropology will fit in some courses. So can you identify what are the main clues in order to research correctly in anthropology that you can give to researchers of social sciences and communication?
Okay, so on the one hand, there are topics which are being right now, like, or not just right now, but every, you know, kind of era or decade, there are topics that are kind of fashionable in a sense that anthropologists like to look at them because they have some kind of current political implications. So whatever is politically relevant, and I mean politics in a very broad sense, not only party politics or national politics. So whatever is politically relevant could be a kind of popular topic of those years. For example, in the 1990s, the big anthropological interest was globalization. And the big social science interest was globalization, right? That's when these theories of globalism, localism, glocalism emerged. What is being much researched lately today is in the United States, for example, indigeneity, indigenous people and the restitution of indigenous rights. That is a big subject of interest. And also in Europe, what I see is, for example, migration, which is also, as you can see, topics that are very importantly tied to politics. And also in the European context, obviously regionalism, nation building, nationalisms, that is also an important current conversation. And so that is, for this particular book, it was an interesting challenge because obviously things have to fascinate you. So for anthropologists out there, I always say, whatever fascinates you, that should be your departure of choosing a topic. But then you always have to speak to some kind of broader relevance. And anthropology has been very politically minded and politically involved. And so in this case, obviously, the political processes of Catalonia and the state region relations in Spain and also broader Europe were the framework. And so I really wanted to, or tried to, make sure that this is not a focus on this isolated practice. You need to make it engage with political processes. You have to see how a particular practice engages with broader concerns. And that's the challenge in anthropology, because you will always research particularities. A practice, a community, it's going to be very micro, but that's not going to be enough. You have to link it to broader social conversations and political conversations. I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, that answers very well my question, because I guess that what you mean is that the perspective on anthropology is always inductive. So from particularities to generalities.
Right. Yes, it's a kind of this conversation between the two, and this kind of dynamics between how they both mutually inform each other.
Very well. Is there any other question in the seminar? Nawel?
maybe I can ask something.
Yeah,
of
Jim.
Jim.
Yeah.
Please.
I wonder, there's two questions really, Mariann. Is there anywhere else in the world that does human towers apart from Catalonia? Do you know?
Well, yes, and in my first chapter, I do, when I discuss various themes, the most important ones in my view for different reasons, I do discuss the Chinese theme. There's a Shikes de Hangzhou, which is an interesting phenomenon. So this Chinese factory owner once was in Barcelona walking about and saw this practice, and so he wanted to create a team in his factory back in China, and he did, and they actually became very good very quickly. They became a Koya de No, a team that is capable of 9-level towers in like 6 years, which is just way too quick. And so I look at how the world of human towers and popular culture looks at this kind of event where your tradition is endorsed by someone very far away who have no idea of the social, political, historical dimensions. In fact, the Chinese often refer to, okay, we are going to Spain to compete, which in the world of human towers, they would correct for Catalonia, right? And so, and yet they know how to build these towers. And there's this ambivalence of fascination with them on the one hand, because they are interested in your traditional practice, and also suspicion because well, what can they know about the cultural background? And anyway, maybe these poor workers are forced. We know that China has its autocratic ways, and maybe participation is not quite voluntary in this Chinese team, which was a concern because obviously in Catalonia, the main point of it is that it's voluntary associationism. So that's an interesting case indeed, the kind of globalization of culture.
Yes. I think there's somebody else wants to come in, Mariann. We have a question from Maria. I think, can you see that? How do you link the incorporation of women into sports in Catalonia with the emergence of women in human towers during the democratic transition? Well, that's a big question. So what do you think about that one then?
Right, so that's a very good question, and it rightly observes that these were intertwined processes, right? The project of the transition, the project of leaving behind the Franco dictatorship, the project of democratization was a political project, but it was also a social project. And so what had to happen, and the women's question featured prominently in it, is to change women's roles and to change women's perspectives, and that had to shift from a particular image of Francoism of women, which was, you know, the mother. There were prizes for motherhood, and the more children you had, the better. And politically, women were not conceived of as real subjects. They had limited rights as citizens, and certainly their presence was not a public presence. And so popular culture, what it had to do is move the female body into a public space and occupy and gain a public presence. And that is already a political move, just women being protagonists, performers, in any kind of cultural performance. For example, human towers, that's already a big political move where women move from a passive position to an active agency. And political culture and popular culture, just by sheer fact of allowing women to show up on the plaza and be participants instead of just watching the bags of performers and watching the shoes of performers. That was a big shift. It's kind of a paradigm shift in the role of women. and of course the democratization of social realms and gender relations.
Yes.
So kind of leading on from that, when we talk about nationalism, does the Human Towers representation, does that construct an inclusive or an exclusive nationalism? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's always a great question.
Yeah.
And Catalan nationalism has been branded as exclusive, and it is, but there are limits to the. I mean, inclusive. What did I say? It's branded as inclusive. Catalan nationalism.
But certainly it's through the football.
Right, as opposed to, for example, Basque nationalism, which was more disruptive and violent. But anyway, but there is in practical terms, through Human Towers, you can also see the limits of inclusion, and these limits are not conscious; they are rather unconscious and come from the practice itself. For example, the world of Human Towers is open to anyone, and that in that way, it kind of is parallel to an ideal of Catalan nationalism, right? But it does end up involuntarily excluding certain segments. For example, the Muslim populations are not quite integrated yet, and I discuss it how, for what reasons. Probably, I mean, there are obviously cultural reasons, which are the intensity of body proximity and touches culturally for Muslims is more complicated. Obviously, the presence of alcohol, of pork, that is also culturally makes it difficult for Muslims, who are a sizable population now in Catalonia, to be integrated in popular culture. And also, for example, as the world of Human Towers kind of shifts towards the side of pro-independence declarations and is more open about them, it might make centralists kind of not wanting to join. Depends on the team, and the everyday operations of a team is not politicized. I don't find that in any way politically exclusive, but centralists who disagree with the Catalan politics might just not join because of this shift. And this shift is itself debated in the world of Human Towers. They want to be politically also, well, first of all, they say that they only participate in NGO organized events, so no political parties. And some teams may make open declarations in favor of independence, but most teams would be in favor of the right to vote, right, which is a less kind of direct political agenda or political position. Just go promote the right to vote, and it is a dilemma to what degree they should politicize themselves, because they are aware that the moment you are very political and openly Catalanist, you will produce exclusionary effects. You will deter, centralists or non-political immigrants who are just as part of your neighborhood like anyone else. And so this is a dilemma, and it's a good question. And so indeed, the question comes down to, can nationalists ever be inclusive entirely? Group formation, as we know, is about in-group, out-group boundaries. And so any kind of group formation, including nation building, would have its exclusions by kind of nature.
Yeah, I mean, it's a...
Oh, and one more thing that might be off-putting for people, particularly immigrants in bigger cities, like South American immigrants, is the use of Catalan exclusively in the teams. And I have seen kind of, the people who, and that's also a big realm of the use of language in Catalonia, particularly in Barcelona, Catalan versus Spanish can be a source of conflict between indigenous Catalan populations and newcomers.
Yeah, there's a whole raft of issues there. Yeah, sorry, Xavi.
I think that Professor Russell Holden wants to do a question, an oral question.
I promote him to panelist.
Yeah, one moment, Russell. We are gonna open your microphone.
You need to unmute. Hi, Russell.
Very strange.
Hello, Russell.
We can hear you, Russell. Hello.
Yeah, I'm here.
It's a bit like the Eurovision Song Contest, this, you know?
Yeah. I haven't got a specific question, actually. I was just really, really interested in the whole concept, and it's something that's completely new to me. So I'm just learning here. No, I'm not there.
We can hear you, Russell. Don't worry. You can do your question.
Yeah, no, I was saying I don't have a specific question because this is all new to me, and I'm learning. I found that really fascinating. It's opened up something that I was completely unaware of. So I remain as the really interested and highly stimulated observer.
I thought that you wanted to do a question because you had your hand raised.
Oh, that was inadvertent.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so there is another question, a supplementary question from Maria, and
Maria.
I guess this brings us into the idea of social class. How does physical contact influence the integration of higher social classes in Castells? Okay.
Mm.
Right. So I have this kind of social historical incursion into the social class dimensions of touch and physical proximity and of course, you know, Castells being proper to the working classes, formerly to the crowded homes of barrios. I always like to say, you know, it's not for nothing that there is no Castells de Pedralbes, which is this exclusive high class barrio of Barcelona. And so what I asked people about their body experiences when they started Castells, and what I note is that it is a challenge. So the way any classes, I think, get, you know, middle and upper classes perhaps, although it's middle more, any classes have to get integrated into Castells is to get used to body proximity, get used to being with people a lot. And I think that's proper more to lower class neighborhoods, for example, where people spend a lot of time in the streets, when homes are crowded. And so you have to have this kind of, you have to get used to spending a lot of time in the streets among a lot of people. You have to get used to the touches. And so people talk about how, for example, a woman told me how when she first did this practice, she had a man's face an inch from hers, and that totally freaked her out, and how she had to go through a kind of bodily socialization to get used to the body proximity. Another man, for example, told me about how he had a certain strange foot anxiety, and he disliked his foot to be touched by his girlfriends, for example. And when he started doing Castells, and he was actually a climber, his naked foot was touching other people, and other people were touching his foot, and he used it as a kind of a cognitive therapy to get rid of his anxiety. Or another person told me about experiences in the base, how when the base closed, he got a panic attack, total panic attack. But obviously when the base closes, the piña, you cannot get out. And he was thinking, can I just get out down between the legs? But obviously that's also impossible. So someone near him noted his panic, and she talked to him and said, it's going to be soon over, just breathe. And so these are serious challenges. And also just entering a team is a kind of challenge. A lot of people, although sociality is its main purpose, but when you go there and you're alone and you don't know anyone, it is kind of putting yourself out there into exposing yourself to a totally unknown and kind of unrelatable body practice. And so you have to overcome these barriers. And I find that this is not, the question is about social class, but it's not only a matter of social class anymore, because we live in a world of a highly mediated world, which is tending towards the visual senses, vision, or the distance senses, such as vision, right? Our communication is more and more based on distant sense channels, hearing, for example, or seeing, viewing. And so this kind of close body contact is increasingly a challenge, particularly in a post-COVID scenario. And COVID, I think, made us even less accustomed to the simple act of being present to other people, much less being touched by so many in such ways. Okay,
any other questions? So, Jim, do you want to close the session?
Yeah, sure. Two or three things to mention. Firstly, thank you so much to Mariann for taking the time to do the presentation. As always, with these, my experience with these webinars is that you tend to have a very tight presentation, and then once it opens up to a discussion, they really contain everything. I mean, it's like the real kind of worms, and touching on language. I mean, I was thinking though, well, my understanding of Catalan is pretty good, but I'd never be good enough at present to join in anything like that, because I just don't speak the language well enough, so all of those things are there. And one or two things to mention in regard to spring. This meeting's been recorded anyway. We're going to have a core meeting on May the 30th in the afternoon, which is a Thursday, in a couple of weeks' time, about spring. And I'm going to circulate the agenda to the core members, and I think Noel is kindly going to put it up on the spring website. And I guess a couple of things to mention is that one of the main topics will be the next spring conference, which is going to be hosted by the University of Malaga, Gemma Corbillo, our colleague, next February. So if you're in the UK or in some cold parts of Europe and you fancy a academic cultural excursion to a warmer climate, Malaga is a good bet in February, I think. So we'll set the call for papers, pretty extensive number of subject areas, and we're going to try and do it as a face-to-face conference, as we usually do, and get a good collection of people in Malaga next February. Other than that, we've got a couple of other webinars planned. One from a colleague of ours, a book launch on July the 11th, so more of that to come. And then we're going to do one in the autumn on investigative journalism, which should be fascinating. We'll have a good panel for that. So that's all I'd like to say at the moment. So thank you so much for keeping the flame alive. I was trying to think of a metaphor between flame and towers and burning and all that. So thank you so much, and we'll good luck in Nevada, and we'll speak again soon, no doubt, about other things, Mariann. Yeah.
Right. See you in Barcelona.
See you in Barcelona next July.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye bye.